Maybe it's better if I use the microphone? You hear me better? You hear me better that way?
No, if you come forward now.
Yeah. How about that? That's better. So, if you recall what I was asking, if you think back to a musical memory you had, and, what's one, a really impactful one, really powerful one you had? And some of the questions I have along with that, I asked you to close your eyes because I wanted you to sort of close down, get rid of the distractions around you, and almost see if you could bring yourself back in. Memory is a really powerful thing. Could get to the point that that memory it's sensory. You smell, you taste, you know, was it a warm day, was it a cold day, blah, blah, blah. But to think where you were, so take yourself back. Now, do you each have your memory? And is it a strong memory for you?
You talk about music in general, not
No. So let me reframe it again. Think back in time to a memory where music had some powerful impact on you. Maybe you were playing, maybe you weren't, maybe you were listening. Were you listening to a recording or were you in an audience? Right? What time of day was it? Time of year? How old were you? Where were you in your life at that particular stage? Maybe it had some connection to something really important to you. And then I throw out with that to think about, if you heard that same piece again now, does it take you back to that time, or does it just have certain connections for you? Does it mean something different to you now? So, now, having thought of that, does everybody have a memory? Yeah. How many would say it was in childhood? Like up till, well, I'll say up till 12. Okay. Teenage? Anybody adult? Okay. Okay. So, how many would say it was positive? And is it a piece that you listen to every once in a while or you come across? You played it? Okay, so you can actually, at any time, you can play it. So, and why I bring these things up is because here we saw in the context of Klein and Bosba and Milad and Stephen Reich, some of them were things that they didn't necessarily experience, but they had to express themselves through music to give their feelings about it. And then some of them had to communicate what they did experience, like Milad with gunfire, oppression, all right? Now we know with Klein, we experienced the trio. His childhood he brought into the play, but he also brought into what he was experiencing at the time he was writing the composition, right? So from there, I want to take us to what would be that next stage, which is transcendence. And the Oxford Dictionary defines transcendence as, quote, the quality of being able to go beyond normal limits or boundaries. And the American Psychological Association classifies it as, quote, a term that may imply a state that goes beyond conventional conceptions of the natural world. Dig a little deeper, and if you look at its etymology, so it comes from the Latin prefix trans, meaning beyond, and the verb scandere, to climb over, as to climb high enough to cross a given boundary. We haven't quite gotten there maybe with Klein, but the composer that we're going to study today is this gentleman here, Victor Ullmann. And the music that Ullmann composed in his final 2 years created such a space. And maybe it was a remedy or a therapeutic approach to his trauma under the Nazis. There's 3 works we're going to look at. 2 of them, we're hearing sound samples. But then when we close, you're going to hear live performances with Michael and Elizabeth, We'll give you a few excerpts as well, but I want to start off by giving you a biographical view of Victor Ullmann. Yeah. So Ullmann. Okay. So he was born in 1898 in Teschen, which was a small garrison town in Silesia on the Polish-Czech border. His father was stationed there as a career officer in the Austro-Hungarian army. Jewish by birth, his parents converted to Roman Catholicism before their marriage to advance their professional and social standing. Following the divorce of his parents in 1909, Ullmann and his mother moved to Vienna, where he studied music theory and composition with Joseph Pollnauer, a noted pupil of Arnold Schoenberg. And this is really key for Ullmann's development. It marks his introduction into the Schoenberg circle. This is Schoenberg, and by that time, Schoenberg was the central figure of what was called the Second Viennese School, associated with the development of what we call the 12-tone system. Ullmann's entry into the Schoenberg orbit was interrupted by World War I, and like his father, he served as an officer on the Italian front. Following the war, there was a brief stint in law school mixed with studies in the Schoenberg Composition Seminar. So his reconnection to the Schoenberg circle further deepened on both the personal and professional levels. And we're going to note this because he was married 3 times, and the marriages are quite revealing in his life. On May 25, 1919, he married Marta Koreff, a fellow student in Schoenberg's seminar class. Ullmann would marry 3 times, and we're going to soon see that connection with each marriage in his life. In the early 20s, Schoenberg recommended Ullmann to be an assistant to Alexander Zemlinsky at the New German Theater in Prague. And you see the German theater right there. Zemlinsky, who's on the left, was a distinguished composer and conductor in his own right. And he also happened to be Schoenberg's brother-in-law. So this 7-year period afforded Ullmann the invaluable experience of being a vocal coach and conductor. After this stint, he directed the Opera House in Alzich and the Schauspielhaus in Zurich. He was displaying really an impressive knowledge of the established and contemporary repertoire. So this, for him, marked the apex of his career as a conductor, and this was only to be followed by a period of artistic, personal, and spiritual crisis. In mid-1931, he abruptly stops conducting and composing, and he wrote to the composer Alban Berg the following: "I am still looking for a 12-tone system, but on a tonal basis. It may involve probing the inexhaustible regions of tonal functional harmony or filling in the gap between romantic and atonal music." Oh, hold on. Get your flask. Oh. So during this period of musical and spiritual soul-searching, Ullmann came under the influence of Rudolf Steiner, the father of the anthroposophical movement. Rooted in German idealist philosophy and theosophy, Steiner described anthroposophy as a, quote, modern-day Germanic Christian spirituality. So we already see with Ullmann, we have the musical component, the spiritual. He's in a, sort of a musical and spiritual wilderness. Where is he going to go spiritually, but also how is he going to find a new language to write? I think he's trying to break from that Schoenberg influence. Well, within 5 months of his divorce, the first one, Ullmann married Anna Witternitz, a fellow Steiner disciple. So here it becomes a pattern. He marries somebody who was in the Schoenberg circle. They get divorced. Now he's going through the spiritual phase of his life, and he marries a disciple of Steiner. They were both fervent followers, and as a result, the Ullmanns moved to Stuttgart, where they acquired an anthroposophical bookstore. And he later wrote, quote, The bookstore gave me the time to spend hours reading and thinking about the challenges of composing and finding my true musical voice. So although a refuge, the bookstore was ultimately a financial failure. Right? Ullmann was very talented as a musician. Running a bookstore, no, all right? Especially when he says that he spends his whole day just reading books. He did not want to be bothered with customers, all right? By the mid-1930s, he had found his compositional voice. It becomes a blend of the 12-tone system and romantic lyricism, much like this gentleman on the left, his friend Alban Berg. He now has a string of successes, receiving the prestigious Hertzke Award for an orchestral work, and then again for an opera, which is called The Fall of the Antichrist. This all abruptly changes with the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia and the implementation of the Nuremberg racial laws, restricting and isolating Jews from all manner of societal life. So you already see a common theme here, just like if you remember Gideon Klein's life being impacted and how his studies, they're stopped abruptly. So amidst this hostile climate, Ullmann sent his two younger children on a Kindertransport to the UK in 1939. So just for a moment, I want to focus on this poignant chapter in Ullmann's life. These are his children from left to right, Maximilian, Felicia, and Johannes. Quarantined with a case of the measles, Maximilian was unable to join the Kindertransport. Johannes and Felicia were separated upon their arrival in the UK. This separation, followed by their family members' deaths in Auschwitz, proved an enduring trauma. Johannes was institutionalized in 1948 until his death in 2010 in a hospital for homeless men. And Felicia, she was adopted by a childless couple. She and Johannes were separated. They were not reunited until he attended her funeral in 2004. So it's an unimaginable family trauma and tragedy that occurred. So if we return back to April of 1941, when Victor and Anna divorce, and within months, Ullmann marries for a third time. And it's a short-lived marriage. He again is divorced. He seems to be more successful in composing than in marriage, all right? Ullmann, along with his first and third ex-wives and his son Maximilian, were sent to Terezin on September 8th, 1942. So, before I go a little further, we saw this photo earlier in the morning, and remember when I brought up, I didn't bring it up looking at this photo, but I think this is something for you to see. When I asked you about what would you bring on a transport, and you can see these are the people that are coming in, and they're bundled up. Photographs are interesting. Sometimes they show things, sometimes you've got to really get more information to flesh it out, all right? But you can see they're really bundled up, multiple layers, they're carrying a variety of items. And then when I talk to you about bringing books or instruments yet, that's a tall order. Right? So I want you to also think about, you're going to see artwork this afternoon that was created by the prisoners. And they're also doing messaging as well in their artwork, just like we were finding in Klein's music earlier today. So Terezin was an Austro-Hungarian garrison town. And that's really surrealistic in a twist in Ullmann's life, because think about it. He was born in another Austro-Hungarian garrison town, and we'll find in the end, ultimately, he spends the last couple of years of his life in yet another one, this one called Terezin. In Terezin, he was a towering figure, culturally speaking, in terms of conducting, lecturing, and producing chamber concerts. And I want you to take closer examination of this poster in Terezin, At the top, it translates from the German, Studio for New Music. You see the director is Victor Ullmann. Then look at these composers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 composers. Ullmann studied with Zemlinsky, who's the second one down, the third one, Schoenberg. He studied with Haber. And then we have Bruno Walter and Gustav Mahler, and Ullmann knew Bruno Walter. So 4 out of the 6 composers that he's featured, he knew, studied, or worked with. It's rather amazing when you consider it. And this was the music that was smuggled in and performed in a camp. He also wrote a series of concert critiques on the rich cultural community within the barracks. He covered bare-bones stagings of Carmen, Tosca, and Fledermaus. And I want to caution you on this because when I say opera, let's take a moment. What do you associate with opera? You go to the opera, what would be some of the unifying elements of an opera experience? Got an orchestra, yeah. You got the singers, but then paint the picture for me of the environment, the surroundings. It's opulent, good word, right. We have sets and costumes, but then on the other side, with the audience, they tend to be elegantly dressed. Maybe we think of chandeliers, right? But that's opulence, really rings. Well, you do not have that opulence in a concentration camp. Here's some other considerations for you. Ron, you mentioned an orchestra. In most cases, you don't have enough instruments to have, the pit orchestra. So here's the parallel to what you heard this morning with Gideon Klein. Remember we heard the excerpt of the Verdi Requiem and hearing the piano reduction? In most cases, you had a pianist who was taking the score and playing in place of the pit orchestra. And then when you think in terms of costumes, they're recycling any materials at hand. And a lot of the so-called productions didn't have costumes. It would be very much like, where we had lunch today. So you know how we went into that room? Think of a room about that size. You won't have seats like we have in this auditorium. There'll be maybe benches, a lot of wooden planks over crates, and then in some cases people are standing. Temperature control, out the window. In the winter, it's brutally cold. In the summer, it can be really hot, right? So it's a different world, but it is remarkable. People are still trying to put on stage productions of like Fledermaus and Tosca. In addition, his critiques, they describe the musicians that were performing, like recitals. And when he writes about them, he tells you not only did they play this or that well, but he makes suggestions. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And the beauty of reading these critiques is you get to see not just that person as a name, you get a sense of what their personalities were like through their musical performances. He also covered the choral groups, and there were a variety of them. It's rather amazing, singing either, in this case, the Dora Choir was singing Czech folk songs. There were arrangements made. There were pieces from the classical repertoire. And then if you look on the left, Ledich String Quartet. There were string quartets in there. There were certain instruments, and I'm trying to give you a little picture of this community so you have a sense that when you hear Ullmann's pieces in the next 20 minutes or so, I want to take you back into that world. Right? So string quartets, trios, those were the predominating ensembles that were formed. Why? It's the considerations of what was available in the camp. You would only play with what you had for instruments and also the repertoire. But let's go on the flip side. You're a composer. What is it that's important to you as a composer? What are the physical things you really need? Paper and pencil. And this especially paper, this is really a rare commodity. Right? This, you usually had to barter. Sometimes people gave up rations to have paper. Right? To have a pencil. Ullmann, when he writes his critiques, he actually had access to a typewriter because he knew the Council of Elders, and they thought what he was doing was so important to record this that they allowed him access. This is one of his critiques, and that gives you a sense of, look at what he has to do. He has to cross out. It's not like he has another sheet that he say, oh, I'll start all over and write a cleaner copy. And throughout these critiques, there's an undercurrent of anxiety flowing through the critiques as well as his music. If you look in the lower right-hand corner, you can see, like so many of the composers, and we saw this with Klein, where he writes Theresienstadt, so where it was composed, and the date of completion. So, like his fellow prisoners, he suffered under the tremendous stresses within the camp. Several close friends, relatives, and colleagues either died in Terezin or were sent on transports to the east, meaning Auschwitz. Just take a look at this artwork for a moment, too. This is by Bedřich Frita. It was done in Terezin in 1943. He really draws our focus into the foreground because he gives more detail in the foreground. Do you notice the elderly woman? Can you see? It's the transport number on somebody's luggage. Okay. Resolution, unfortunately, is not clear enough, but if you look at this woman here, it looks like string of pearls. But he does it in a manner that it looks like she's emaciated, her rib cage is sitting out. You see the blind man. It's so crowded, there's really nobody that's going to guide him, right? And then he draws the focus just a little left of center to the man with the suspenders. But if you look at the posture of everybody, they're all bent over. He's giving the messaging of the overcrowding, starvation, the overall conditions. So the first piece we're going to look at is his string quartet. And his third one is the one that he wrote in Terezin. It's completed in January of 1943. And he even writes on the title page the sections. I want you to listen to the opening. So in this opening, and you're going to help me out, since we have a small group, we can go back and forth with a little, input from how do you feel, what does it bring for you? And if it helps, close your eyes while you're listening. But I want you to think of what adjectives come to the forefront in your mind, describing the mood, maybe how you feel or what images come to mind. So, it's not really the atonality of Schoenberg, is it? It's quite simple, too. It's a combination. But think about mood.
I think it's such a new role because of the way the bass was brought.
Yeah.
Double bass.
Felt like spring to me.
Spring.
Yeah, it was very
What did you say? Spring.
Spring.
That had me too.
Really?
Spring, like,
Like something's blooming, or?
Well, it seemed very full.
Well, it is opening up at times, yeah, okay.
Felt like anxiety to me.
What's that?
Anxiety to me. I felt like something's, yeah.
Building, something's building.
I'm glad you felt spring-like though.
But would you buy Nostalgia?
Especially in the context, if this is done in the camp,
Yeah.
the
Well,
context.
here's a challenge for us.
Okay,
Because I'm going to ask you, but I'm also telling you where it was done.
okay.
But what if you didn't know where it was done? Is it any less in its impact? Maybe not. Maybe you still feel the same. Like, would you say you feel melancholy or nostalgia with this music? Would that be fair?
I think it's a good amount.
Yeah. So, all right, but then maybe when we pair it with his history, is he thinking back to a sweeter time? Right? And then when you're thinking back to something, there's a
Sadness
It's a
sometimes.
sadness, it's painful, it could be beautiful. And if it's a beautiful memory, it has its own little pain because you can't bring that back, can you? It's fleeting. It's the human condition, right? So, then he opens us up into his past world with that quartet, right? And then he does something that I think very interesting for us. It's a bridge going into the next section. I hope you can hear this. Do you know, Raquel, do you know if there's somebody in the sound room that we could pump it up a little louder?
I don't think she said the two speakers would spread around, that's all she could do.
Oh, okay. So, let's see if we can hear this. So what do you notice from that? Something that's really obvious. Well, we got a string quartet, right? Just one,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, and it's going down, right? So if we go back to it again, if you guys want to come up and sit with us,
I don't know if he wants to up there. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, come bring a chair. You know, grab a chair.
Yes, chair over here.
Oh yeah, there's a chair.
Oh, couple chairs.
So. It's almost like it's inflation. The other thing I think is, it goes from quartet down to one voice. Is that him? Is that any different than, for example, you know, when you see, particularly, say, Renaissance paintings where sometimes the painter inserts himself in the painting. It's like, it's the signature, right? So they're part of it. Maybe Roland's doing that too. And then he takes it into the next section, and it's a waltz. So what do we know about a waltz? Exactly. And it's in what you 3/4. So 1, 2, 3. Just as I asked you to associate the things that are part of an opera, what do you think about in terms of a waltz?
Festive.
Yeah, party, high energy.
High energy,
Pretty gowns.
gowns, right? And remember, he came out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire
Yeah.
near the end of it, right?
Did you say festive?
Elegance.
Did you say festive? Yes.
And so we have the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? And here's his waltz. I wish this could be. can't, but, actually, maybe if I put the mic.
Messages.
It really is in your face, and actually, if you heard it at the right dynamic, it's fortissimo. Right, so you're getting a very different experience. But just as you just got that feedback, that's actually what he wants from you to experience. That it's jarring, it's jagged, it's aggressive. And also the darkness of the cello lurking underneath. You know there's something sinister about this. Right? So now he's taking you from his world of the past. He's the link person with the cello coming down, and he's transitioning you to his anxiety. And it's not necessarily the anxiety of being in the camp. We all too often, and I think, Ron, you go through this too with your Holocaust studies, there's a focus of being in the camps, but not necessarily much of a focus of what was it like to be under occupation. Because you got to wear the star at all times. You have the Nuremberg racial laws, so you're excluded from not only performing, but your access to social events, you're ostracized, you're the other. Your life has been, you are totally isolated, right? So he takes us into that with this threatening waltz. And let's hear this. That's, okay, so I'll give you a non-musical example of a fugue. So you have a theme. So let's start with a sentence. Give me a simple sentence.
The cat climbed up the tree.
Oh, yeah, the cat ran up the tree. Okay. So that's the theme. And let's say it's a 4-part fugue. So you have it, we'll just alternate, right? So the timbre of your voice, wherever you come, you state it, and after went up the tree, the end of the tree. Now you're going to start the cat went up the tree. But the counterpoint is, you can talk about a tree or a cat. It's something connected to the thing, but you don't keep repeating. You might just start saying, the cat was furry, the cat was cold, the cat was bouncing, right? and while you've now stated it, now you come and state it, you're still on the cat, but you're now on the tree. That's counterpoint, because it's always connected to something. And in the end, would you agree with that as a musician?
I never thought about in cats and tree terms, but other than that, yes.
But I'm talking about just the structure of a sentence.
Excellent.
Yeah, and so in the end, if we were to go backward, we could recreate and end up back to the theme in the beginning. Right? Now, if you started talking about fire engines and had nothing to do with cats, we've run straight, okay? But you have the fugue, and so, yeah, so, you know, but with the fugue with Ullmann, he's now going to state something where he gives you, listen to his theme.
Heavy. Maybe some
reason why I bring it up. So the tendency is like a string player, you will vibrate. And depending on if you vibrate faster, it could be more intense sound or slower. There's a different feel to it, right? But if you notice, there's no vibrato. It's kind of zombie. And it keeps going and he stops again. So there's almost like a hiccup. Never quite has overarching flow to it. Right? And then the other thing is, when you hear those voices, he does write where it's where it's separated, like where it's a hollow sound. So I've been having played this a couple of times or recorded it, living with this piece. When we're in the moment as a quartet playing this, this must have been a window into how day-to-day life was in mind.
You experience it as a player, you're saying.
Yeah, you
As you
almost feel
play,
like it's
you can
communicating,
feel-
because it's like it's drumming, you're moving, you're marching along the tune. What is your goal? Is there resolution? Is there a high? And the other thing that I wouldn't expect you to quite get, but there's a tone there. So he's giving a nod to Schoenberg, which is the 12 voices. It's like, I know this from Titus many times, but there are certain things you hear that are tonal. You could stick in your ear automatically like it's a Pijuso back. I don't think you would do that right off the bat. So this is a different system of play. And then he does something in the music. So, Sul Pont. It's actually Pont is for Ponticello. Ponticello and Italian bridge. And if you play really close to the bridge, you can get a very raspy or an icy sound. You've probably heard it like in horror movies, things like that, where there's drama, tremolo. Right? It's an effect. And then he's this pure diminuendo, very much so, to go down in volume. Right? And he has it only in one voice. So it's kind of like a cello, but this time he gives it to the violin. And I hear this, if you can, really listen to this. So can you hear the rasping sound of that? There's a physicality to that. Okay? I think amidst all that lifelessness is that most of the life now. So then I'm going to ask you a question that I asked you about the Gideon Klein trio. When I said, where do you go from the second movement to the last? And here's this finale. Because it's lifeless, it's out of breath. And if you think back, he has the nostalgia of a previous time that was safer, better. But then he gets to that sinister waltz. And then we get to the lifelessness of the fugue. What do we do with it? Where do you go? What's left? I mean, you know, it's pretty much a downward trajectory, isn't it? What do you think he does? Good. And what does that mean, the other direction? Let's say it's the other direction. What would that mean, the other
For
direction?
me, it would be a sense of hopefulness, a sense of maybe.
Okay, so let's say hopefulness.
You
Okay.
already told us transcendence, right? So is that where we're going?
Maybe. Sometimes it's not predictable because you have. But this is this is militaristic. It's really aggressive, right? So we haven't left that world of that depression, right? But he's not done. That's his opening. But where he closes, now, I'm not going to say anything further. Listen, and then I want to hear what your move playing.
think?
Sounds like it's like the end of a movie.
Yeah.
What is that?
All right, so you got your black and white movie, yeah.
Well, when you talk about transcendence, it sounds like there's an opening, that the skies open up, or there's...
Could be, all right? So this is where we have to be careful because I'm not going to disagree with you, but remember, we're on the journey to transcendence.
Right.
I'm trying to take you along how Ullmann gets there through music. He doesn't necessarily do it yet. He's close. I would make the case, if you listen to this maybe differently in a way of defiance. Because think of let's go back. It's screaming. If you heard it really loud like it should be. I mean, it's shrieking, high violin. So can you hear that? That's a possibility, all right? So we have defiance, and this is 1943. Now we go to an opera. Now, one of the things I'm going to recommend for you guys, I think to get a little better benefit of the sound clips, move your chairs closer to the speakers, because we're just not getting enough volume. And it is a different experience when you hear it closer to what it should be.
We put this on here as a fundraiser a couple years ago.
Uh-huh.
The Connecticut Lyric Opera.
Oh, now we're going to really take it apart today.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what I'm going to suggest, so you can have the benefit of the experience, you're more like that, and then you'll have the live performance later.
Did you recommend us doing this? How did we get to this?
What's that?
Did you recommend that we put this on? Was it your recommendation?
Well, I know we had talked about it. I don't know if you felt it was my recommendation or what, but we did talk about it.
Yeah, but somehow, I don't know how else we would have gotten here.
Yeah,
So take a look. This just tells you, look at the scoring for this piece. And it's quite different, isn't it? I mean, how many operas do you know have a banjo? And then you've got alto sax. But why? Why would it be like that? The instruments that are in the camp. He has to write for what is available.
yes.
So we look at that pairing down with the scale of the number of singers, and it becomes basically a chamber orchestra. And it's a pit orchestra, and it's a chamber opera. So for the Nazis, this would be further evidence of what is called Entartete Musik, or degenerate music. And what was degenerate music for the Nazis? The influences that would be corrupting what they considered high Germanic opera traditions of, say, for example, Mozart or Wagner. And as you'll soon hear, Ullmann's score is suffused with the quote-unquote subversive, or as the Nazis labeled it, the degenerate influences of cabaret, blues, jazz, and atonal classical music. So this is a rendering of what the set would look like for the opera in the camp. And you can see, like, remember I told you in the past, it would be really very pared down for whatever materials they could put together. So this is Petra Keen, who was a poet and an artist. He was a prisoner in Terezin, and he wrote the libretto with a basic plot line having a particular resonance with their fellow prisoners. The Kaiser of Atlantis, he declares a holy war against the universe. And he's assuming death's obeisance, and so the emperor proclaims his old ally will command his campaign. Well, offended by the emperor's insolence, Death refuses to let anyone die. So, 3 of the 7 roles in this opera, you have the emperor, the loudspeaker. Why the loudspeaker? The loudspeaker, well, this is like the radio. This was the propaganda vehicle in the Nazi party that Ullmann's referring to. And then we have the drummer girl. And basically, they symbolize Hitler and his Nazi apparatus. And this makes this production a really risky undertaking. So you can imagine with the rehearsals, lookouts were posted to whistle warnings of approaching SS guards. And sections of the music and the libretto were bracketed in blue to facilitate immediate segues from politically charged scenes. So in the summer of 1944, rehearsals began in the basement of Barracks L411. The production was ultimately halted, most likely by the Jewish Council of Elders, for fear of SS retribution. So the opera opens with an ascending and descending tritone motif. The tritone, this is an unresolved interval of what we call an augmented fourth. And as you can see in the musical notation here, for centuries it was deemed by the church as the devil's interval. So in Josef Suk's Azrael Symphony, it's a central motif with Azrael, as you see in this painting, the angel of death. And Suk composed this work after suffering two great losses: the sudden deaths of his wife and his mentor, who you see on the left. That was his father-in-law, Antonin Dvorak. You may know of Dvorak through the New World Symphony. So during the First Czech Republic, this work was performed on occasions of national mourning. So this is, any reference here to this piece, the Czech prisoners in Terezín would automatically identify with this. So here is an excerpt from Suk's symphony of that tritone motif. It's a pretty serious piece, right? You can tell, and it's a large orchestration. But now, listen to how Ullmann treats it. Ba-da-da-da.
Hallo, hallo, Sie hören jetzt der Kaiser von Nordland.
So this is critical. You know, he quotes the tritone, and he starts out with hello, hello. But for Ullmann in this opera, what he's doing, it's sort of like a police or ambulance siren. It's an alarm to awaken not only the prisoners who would have heard it if they were allowed, but for those of us who do hear this, it's an alarm to awaken our consciousness that evil is afoot. So scene one opens with arias sung by, as you see these two characters, Death and Harlequin, a commedia dell'arte figure representing life. Let's look at the lines here in the libretto. They're lamenting the state of affairs in the post-Habsburg world. In Harlequin's aria, Ullmann references from Gustav Mahler's The Song of the Earth, the drunkard in spring. Because look, we see in these lines, the world's all topsy-turvy, right? Here's the Mahler. So Ullmann does the same thing. He writes for tenor, and the changes in tempi, he sort of mirrors what Mahler's doing. We can hear it in Harlequin's aria. Rushes ahead and then pulls back. then there's Death's aria. And we look at, they held such wars then. There's already nostalgia in this, right? I raced so often alongside Attila's horses, Hannibal's elephants, and Genghis Khan's tigers. All I do is limp after the new angels of death. I am no more than death's lackey. And in the score, I think this is interesting, Ullmann's tempo marking is blues / allegro maestoso. Let's hear it.
Das waren Kriege, man die prächtig sein Kleid mich zu ehren, mich zu ehren.
So did you expect that type of music in Terezin? No, right? And the variety of styles already that he's integrated into the score, right? So then we go to the drummer girl. And she represents Goebbels and the Nazi propaganda machine. And here, what you're about to hear in this in this excerpt, she intones the litany of the emperor's many long-winded titles. This is followed by the emperor's declaration of universal war with death as his ally. And here's the thing to note, and I think you'll recognize all of this is underpinned by the German national anthem, Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles. And I think the moment I give you this excerpt, you're going to recognize it, only it's in the hands of Haydn. So from Haydn, we go to Ullmann. But he restates it in the minor mode. So now the plot thickens, and you can see the text. Can you see it back there? Okay. Death is angered by the emperor's audacious affront. In a sort of Shakespearean twist, Death states the consequence and central conflict of this opera, again with background strains of the German anthem.
Die Fahne vorantragen, meine große Vergangenheit, eure große Zukunft. Freund Heinz Nachfolger. Was machst du da? Ich mache die Zukunft der Menschen groß und
So how do you fight a war when nobody is allowed to die? Right? This is the central conflict. And think about this in the context of being written and potentially performed in a concentration camp. So in scene 3, we face the reality of Death's refusal tinged with a love interest. I mean, after all, what's an opera without a love interest, right? So Bubikov, the young lady, shoots, as you can see here, the enemy soldier. And the soldier, he falls, yet he lives. And then they engage in a violent tussle, and this is voiced by the piano, with them only to fall in love eventually. Gunshot. So if you can see the text below, Bubikov throws away the gun, and then they sing, "Now that which makes death beautiful is in full bloom. The flower of love brings peace to all, and death becomes a poet when he is united in love." So this is the first of three pivotal moments in the opera, redefining death. It's a surrealistic twist on Wagner's Tristan and Isolde, Liebestod, which in Terezin would have served as symbols of hope and the triumph of love. So in scene 3, it further emphasizes death's moratorium with a bit of gallows humor. It's kind of like a Laurel and Hardy-like recitative with the Lautsprecher reporting an assassin's failed execution to the emperor. So, does death refuse to do his duty? Your order has been carried out. Well, and it goes back and forth. Thousands are wrestling with life, doing their utmost to die. A strange sickness has broken out. The soldiers cannot die. So, with that dilemma, we have the scene where it shifts to the emperor asking death, "Who are you?" And take a moment, read this. I'm struck by this. I am the greatest celebration of freedom. I am the lullaby. In Terezin, this would have been a compassionate yet heartbreakingly dark lullaby. So with a touch of irony, the emperor asks, "Will you return to us? We men cannot live without you." And death agrees, provided the emperor is the first to, quote, "submit to the new death." And he reluctantly agrees, but he says, "But humanity does not deserve it." So leading the emperor to his death, Ullmann references the musical farewells of both Bach and Mahler. All three of these farewells share a prominent oboe accompaniment to the vocal line. So let's hear Bach.
Ich habe den Ich habe den ich habe den
And then Mahler. Here comes the oboe. And then in Ullmann's hands. There's the voice, and then the oboe.
Vor der Götter Lächeln nicht besteht. Der Abschied.
So, restoring the natural order, the opera closes with Ullmann quoting the Lutheran chorale, "A mighty fortress is our God." He's also making the following nod to Mendelssohn's Reformation Symphony. So there's an irony to this too, because Mendelssohn was deemed, because of his Jewish background of his family, to be a degenerate and forbidden composer. And we go to Ullmann's ending. He's quoting directly that chorale. So think about that. I look at this. When you see "thou shalt not" to start, what comes to your mind? 10 Commandments. And I think, here's the 11th commandment. And it's not from God, the 11th commandment from man. It's a real twist. So you have two transcendent moments in this opera that are not only for the prisoners, but for humanity at large. So Ullmann's search for meaning and the transcendence culminates in the 3 songs you're about to hear for a soprano and piano that's set to the poetry of the German early Romantic poet Friedrich Hölderlin. Unlike his quartet and opera, these songs had a far better chance of flying under the censorship radar of the Jewish Council of Elders and the SS. Ullmann provides an otherworldly, ecstatic, and mystical setting of these poems. These last songs, composed before he was sent to the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau, convey an undercurrent of darkness and suffering. And I'd like Michael and Elizabeth, if they're backstage, if they can come out and join us. Let's see if they're here. One second. Welcome, please join us.
Sign in, please.
Yes. Judge Orr? Yeah. So, looking at, there are 3 songs. We have Sunset, and in case your German is not the best, we'll leave that up there, all right? Look at the language. Where are you? My intoxicated soul surrenders to the Lord. And you can see, this is chromatic music. It descends chromatically with a series of triplets that, well, it conveying a sense of romantic, if not inner insecurity, imbalance. And with the music, he paints for you this text so beautifully. I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to let this song speak for itself as you're looking at the text. Okay.
There's actually one thing I'd like to say about this song.
Within an hour. Yeah, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I'll do it in less than an hour.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing for me about this song is that this harks back to an almost classical Greek approach to music, because it's almost modal, and he's talking about this guy who's going to be playing on his lyre. And so when you listen to this, this is, I think, he was also harking back to a pre-romantic.
He's drifting back, he is,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
That it's very Greek for me, this song.
Das Mächtige Nacht, wie groß
So Michael, I like how you set that up to give them the background of it. You know what I'm curious, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
The vocal range of this. If you could share.
It's, all of these songs are quite rangy. They go to like a low mezzo, almost contralto range, and then the next song has a high B flat in it. So they're quite rangy. And the secret to singing them is not to make it noticeable. Does that make sense? Yes. To just smear it around. It's a little Straussian in that. It's a little bit of Salome and a little bit of Electra thrown in, and it's fun chords with beautiful high singing over them.
Because this is a composer who was immersed in Vienna at the turn
Yeah.
of the 20th century, so he was listening to Strauss. He heard Salome. He heard Electra. You know, they grew up with The Ring. I mean, Brunhilde in The Ring, that's really the sort of birth
It's
of
the
this
same kind of
stuff
singing.
that has
Low,
to do
low,
this.
high, low, low,
It's
high.
wide ranging,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
high drama.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
High voltage, yeah.
High drama and a complete lack of regard for the register of
And
this.
yet, the piano, when you look at the piano writing, you're that beautiful underpinning, that
Yeah.
cushion, if you will, and then you soar and descend, you're swooping up and down.
They're very orchestral piano parts.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about how beautifully these would be orchestrated. And I try to do that when I'm playing them. I try to sort of give various voices and colors and things. Because it's a very rich, it's not just chord, 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 you know, it's not like Schubert. Schubert is just like, this stuff is,
Yeah. So our next song, The Spring, also very chromatic treatment, the piano writing. Again, we can't imagine this as an orchestra. I mean, it is out of that tradition. When you think of Strauss, the thickness of, Michael, you could relate to this. Think of the vocal writing of Zemlinsky.
right.
All right, of that period, and you can tell that Ullmann is really a product of his Viennese schooling, and what he chooses for poetry. Would you want to say anything about the text? I feel that there's, once again, that's that yearning,
Well,
and they wander alone there's the wandering, okay? There's the radiance with health and calm well-being.
Painting, word painting.
Hölderlin is sort of the ultimate German romantic
Yeah.
poet of the late 18th century. You know, these poems are, and they're all about the things that these guys love to think about:
Yeah.
isolation and loneliness,
Sadness.
and trying to make common cause with other men,
Right.
and how hard it is to make common cause.
And the harder, the better. They wallowed in it.
You're
yeah.
born alone, you die alone, you
Yeah.
try to do something in between, you think you got some friends, you don't have any friends. I mean, Hölderlin he was a desperate character.
Yeah.
He really was.
And Ullmann was no different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just talk to his 3 ex-wives.
Yeah,
That'll tell you a lot, too.
you like girls.
And then we get to the last of the three, and the most substantial by far, the Evening Fantasy. Let's take a moment just reading through this poem. Everything seems fine and well the first two stanzas, doesn't it? Then we get that question, but where am I to go? And there's almost like the biblical reference, man lives on labor and wages.
Second half. We don't have the last stanza.
Oh, is that?
We don't have the last stanza.
Oh, so what I'd like to do is two excerpts if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
The last two stanzas, which you don't even have up here,
That's great.
are even more desperate.
Yeah,
It's like,
here.
There we go.
And I even highlighted.
There it is.
And then come then to me soft sleep at the end. That reference to Bach, this is Genug. Peaceful and happy shall age then follow. Wish. Where there's the foolish prayer, the magic vanishes. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
well, also, I think it's important to remember, these guys were all reading Schopenhauer. If you ever think you're having a really good day, read some Schopenhauer.
Right.
Because it's this, he encapsulates this like, I'm having a good day, I only had one hangnail. You know, so unfortunately Schopenhauer permeates all.
Actually, I was thinking we would do those two excerpts, but maybe what is better, let them hear the whole song, but before we do it, those last 8 bars, especially with you at the end,
Yeah.
and it's just, it doesn't want to settle, and then it's resignation of
Right.
resolution.
The bottom drops.
Yeah, just to hear, it's set volumes right there.
So should we just do this whole song?
Can you just do those last few bars, just so they get it in their ear, and then let's do the whole song, yeah.
So the piano plays out after she finishes, and she finishes, sing from Ist an den Alter, just from 7. She finishes, and then the piano goes on. Ist an das Alter.
Okay.
There we go.
It's like out of the 4 last songs of Strauss, too. It's,
At least he gets a major chord.
yeah,
So
you get that F major at the end, huh?
As the birds fly away.
Shall we?
shall we?
Shall we? Sure.
God
Thank you. So we took in 3 works of Ullmann in Terezin, a string quartet, a chamber opera, and these 3 songs. And what I want to close with, we know what this is. I want you to focus on that portion of Guernica. Because amidst all that chaos, the brutality of the painting, and it's a huge painting, there's the open space. Is it transcendence? Is it freedom? And then we have a parallel to this. In fact, it's referenced in Terezin by another artist, Frita. I may have to get closer to point out to you, because the image is not so clearly defined. But this is called In the Hospital, but it's in the cinema, actually, in Terezin. So, what do we see? Do you notice the chairs? They have their numbers, right? But what do they look like? What's that? Tombstones. So we have tombstones, right? Remember in Guernica, there's the hand reaching out? And then look at this person in the hospital, right up there, the hand up. But it's a theater, and there's the screen. And what's to the far left? Statue of Liberty, the symbol of freedom, right? Now, remember, I drew your attention to the upper right-hand corner of Guernica, where is the open space, right? Is there an open space here? Well, the closest we get to is when you look, and there's the door with the exit in Czech and German. You see it? So you have Guernica referenced there with the arm up of the ailing. You have the tombstones. You have the Statue of Liberty, the open screen, emptiness, the void, and then there's the exit. Well, it's like a chandelier. Yeah, but, right. And then look at the so-called paneling, zigzagging every which way. There's no continuity, right? So, but you have Frita and you have Guernica, and there is that space. Where is the exit out of all this madness? How do you transcend it? And we started with going through with Klein and Bosba and Milad, right? And then we end with Ullmann's Search. In the end, do they get that? I don't know. Yeah. So we don't know. What's that?
Is your horns?
Yeah. So they're spikes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Looks like Einstein, the man in the front to the right.
Einstein? Oh, never thought of it that way.
Right. The man sitting in the front row, see? To the right.
So we've come full circle in this morning and afternoon session. And you see the power of music to communicate, especially with these composers whose music we've studied, and composers who are new to most of us in our listening experience. That wraps today's session. Thank you. All right. All right.